Don't forget to hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. And also, don't forget to hit that notification bell. And I'll see you all later.
Hey everybody, Mr. JK here. So, finally, we get to the next video on this list. America Pilot. This is another Fat Electrician video, first off.
Obvious.
Foremost. Secondly, the video is titled American Pilot Obliterates 5 Enemy Planes in 4 minutes. And this is a video on Edward Butch O'Hara. Something that I've seen Vincent actually comment on my video, by the way. Thanks for another suggestion, though I will admit I was going to get to this one. The next one you did comment on, however, I believe it was... The other one was America Has No Chill on Christmas. That will be the next video after this one. So, anyways, enough of me pussyfooting around. Let's get to the video, shall we? Alright, so let's get started. I'm not going to talk anymore. We're going to get started in 3, 2, 1, go.
I hate it when I start researching for a video and the truth ends up getting in the way of a good story. Luckily, this is a good story regardless.
Wait.
Today we're talking about America's first naval ace of World War II. Ladies and gentlemen, Edward Butch O'Hare. But first, a word from our sponsor. This video is brought to you by Delete Me.
Finally.
Oh shit. Here we go again.
We're back to this again.
Is that a CMMG Descent?
Come find out.
Guys, I gotta go. Well, actually, hold on.
Again.
What's it chambered in?
It's 300 blackout.
Yeah, I gotta go. Sorry about that. Anyways, Delete Me is super straightforward. You give them money, they make sure that all your personal information isn't being sold on the internet by data brokers. You see, data brokers are legally required to stop selling your information if you submit an opt-out request. However, submitting an opt-out request is different for every different data broker firm, and they make it as difficult as possible, and Delete Me does all of it for you automatically. Then, after they do delete all your information from data brokers, they continue to monitor all of those data brokers in case your information does get relisted again. They will automatically take it down again. I like Delete Me a lot. It's a service that I actually use. I also just got my wife signed up for it a couple of months ago. As you can see here, they checked for 142 different data brokers and 80 of them had her personal information, and they show us what information that they had. So if you wanted to give it a try, I will have a link and a discount code down below. Let's get back to the video.
I'll try it out one day when I'm actually having money.
Now, our story actually begins with his father. So, once upon a time in 1893, Edward Joseph O'Hare, EJ for short, was born in St. Louis, Missouri as a son of 2 first-generation Americans that had just come over from Ireland. He spent his entire childhood in St. Louis, and then in 1912, he would meet his wife Selma. They would end up getting married, and then they would live in an apartment above a grocery store that was owned by Selma's father. Shortly after that, in 1914, Selma would give birth to their first child, Edward O'Hare, that would later come to be known as Butch. Butch would also get 2 little sisters, Marilyn and Patricia, and by all accounts, they had a really happy little family. Okay, fast forward, 1923, EJ takes the Missouri State Bar, he passes it, becomes a lawyer, and almost immediately gets this new client by the name of Owen P. Smith, and he is the commissioner of the Greyhound Racing Association for the entire nation. And he needs a lawyer because he needs to patent his new invention, that little electric rabbit that goes around the dog racing track that all the dogs chase. So EJ gets that done for him, and then Owen decides that he wants to keep him around, so he makes him a business partner because he needs a good lawyer that's going to be able to help him keep dog tracks open and open up new dog tracks, because at this point in time, dog tracks received a ton of political resistance. And this is because in 1910, gambling got outlawed, so for the next decade, all the dog tracks were just going out of business, because without the gambling revenue coming in, the business just wasn't financially viable. And I mean,
it's kind of like another version of like horse racing at that time, because I know about dog racing.
To go just watch dogs run in a circle if you're not betting money on it, right? If so facto, all the dog tracks ended up shutting down except for the ones that were willing to engage in underground illegal gambling, which is why they needed a good lawyer like EJ. But before EJ even passed the bar and became a lawyer in 1923, things were already set into motion that would eventually change that. You see, 1920 was Prohibition, when the government banned alcohol. Okay, sidebar. The amount of videos that I have done on this channel and my other channel, The Fat Files, where everything ties back to Prohibition is absolutely insane. It's like that game, 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, where every single person on the planet knows Kevin Bacon within 6 relationships. I can do any historical event and tie it back to Prohibition somehow, in some way, in some fashion.
That's fucking nuts.
I know it's possible.
Take a look at this.
I mean, just off the top of my head from videos that I've already covered, Prohibition is directly responsible for Domino's not going bankrupt in 2012. Every American warship had an ice cream machine on it. That time that America had multiple ships completely
I need to see that one.
dedicated to just making ice cream and distributing it to the Pacific Theater in World War II. The fact that there's 7 billion pounds of cheese in underground caves all over America. The fact that every dairy farmer is required by law to pay into a giant advertising fund so that they can advertise milk, which is where Got Milk came from. Pretty much all the
Oh my God, I can't believe it. That fucking story is so hilarious.
IRS codes regarding tax evasion, and now this
Wait, that also? What?
This story as well is also brought to you by Prohibition, that one time that the US government tried to ban alcohol and failed miserably. Now, as we all know, after alcohol got banned, organized crime stepped in. They started distributing alcohol. They established speakeasies. They had bootleggers. They manufactured their own booze, and they made a ton of money while they did it. And by 1925, they had gotten so wealthy and so powerful that they were actually able to buy off politicians and law enforcement, and they were able to get away with whatever they wanted, and they were looking for more ways to make even more money, whether it was legal or not. And one of the things they decided that they wanted to do was to get into gambling via dog racing tracks, and now that they had politicians on their payroll, they would actually be able to get the building permits, build all new dog racing tracks, and not be busted for gambling by the law enforcement because they were paying off them too. So you're a big-time mobster that wants to get involved in dog racing, money's not going to be an issue, getting building permits from politicians isn't going to be an issue, and the law enforcement's going to leave you alone. What's the last thing you need?
If I do, the thing is, like, I know about the Prohibition thing because I've seen like the oversimplified video before on Prohibition, so I know about this. This is, yeah.
You need somebody that knows how to run a dog racing track and one of those stupid electric rabbit things, right? Right. So that's what they do. The mobsters go and they get a hold of Owen Smith and his legal consigliere, E.J. O'Hare. And when I say mobsters, I just mean the first big-time guy to figure all this out and put the plan together, and that was a gentleman from Chicago by the name of
Al Capone.
Al Capone.
I know.
Yeah, E.J. and Owen are now partnered with Scarface.
Oh, baby. Holy shit.
Definitely looks suspicious. And his Southern Italian heritage raises some flags.
Using Capone's connections, they end up building...
Oh my God, it's like, this has something to do with Capone. Like, somewhere in the back of my mind, it's like, this has something to do with Capone in some way. Because the moment he mentioned mobsters, it's like, oh, guys, Al Capone. Yep.
Building dog tracks in Chicago, Miami, and Boston, and they make a ton of money. And this goes on for years, and EJ ends up earning his new nickname from the mob, Easy Eddie. And back at the O'Hare house, they go...
Holy shit.
From, doing pretty okay financially to being very wealthy very quickly. And despite EJ, Easy Eddie, Dad, being in bed with the mafia and working with Al Capone, when he's back home, by all accounts, he is a terrific father to all 3 of his kids and a great husband to his wife. But Butch, his son, is the absolute apple of his eye. They have a really special relationship. Using all this new money he has, he goes up, he takes him camping, teaches him how to shoot guns, and then he even gets into flying airplanes, loves taking Butch up into the airplane with him, and sometimes even letting him take control of the plane, and Butch falls in love with both flying and shooting guns. And this goes on for years, being a bad guy for a...
Holy shit. Dude's dad was fucking Easy Eddie. And I saw it in the title, it's like Easy Eddie. I think I've heard that name before somewhere. But to hear where it comes from, I was like, oh, this is where it comes from. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Living and being a good
dude, it's like there's so many interesting mob stories out there. I know, like, there's one particular gangster that was a mob boss that's no longer a mob boss now. It's like doing stories. I can't remember his name, but he was I think a member and then became a boss of the Colombo crime family, I believe. But what is his name? I forgot his name.
Dad back at home. So fast forward 1927, Owen P. Smith ends up passing away. Now, since his business partner just passed away, he acquires the business and the patent to the electric rabbit. And this is where things get a little controversial depending on which source you want to read. Some sources imply that he swindled Owen's widow out of the patent and out of the money, and some other sources say that he basically paid her out. Which, to be fair, both of those are completely possible. He is a crooked lawyer working for the mafia, and also it's pretty standard practice that if you are in a business partnership and your partner passes away, a way that you buy out his shares and you acquire the entire business. So you can go ahead and pick whichever one you like more for that. Now, it's also at this point in time, right around 1927, that Easy Eddie and his wife Selma come to the realization that their son Butch is adapting a little bit too well to their new life of luxury. I mean, they have enough money to give their kids anything they want. The problem with Butch is all he wants is to sit in the house, read books, and eat donuts 3 times a day. He's 13 years old and he's already starting to get fat and kind of lazy. And one day he reaches peak laziness when he asks his mother at the age of 13, "Hey mom, can I borrow the car to go to the bakery?" The bakery is literally 4 doors down where he buys his donuts. He didn't want to walk like 60 feet to go get a box of donuts so he could eat it. At that point, his parents realized that they had a problem on their hands. So they do what any good parents would do. They come to him with love and compassion, and they hold his hand and they look deeply
That's not what's happening, I'm guessing.
into his eyes, and they tell him, "It's okay." I'm just fucking kidding. They sent his ass straight to military school.
Well, Troop, you've polished your boots before everyone else.
I thought, yeah, that's about right.
It's a fat camp. Are you crazy? No way.
So he gets shipped off to Western Military Academy in Illinois. Fast forward 3 years, 1930. Butch is in his junior year of military school, and he absolutely loves it. He's not much for conventional sports like football or wrestling. However, he did end up joining the water polo team, which he really enjoyed, and that's actually how he got his nickname Butch. And he has decided not only does he enjoy military school, but he wants to go on to be in the actual military. He wants to go directly into the U.S. Naval Academy. So that's what Butch is up to. Easy Eddie's still just raking in the dirty gambling money with Al Capone, so much so that in 1930, he buys a massive mansion that has an indoor skating rink and an indoor pool in this really fancy neighborhood in St. Louis. And this is the part where the truth kind of gets in the way of a good story, because when this story is usually told, there hasn't been all this context that I've already given you guys. It's literally just they open up like, hey, there was this lawyer that worked for the mafia and Al Capone. His name was Easy Eddie, and he was the best lawyer around, and he's the reason that Al Capone got kept out of prison, okay? Which, right out of the gate, that's not true, okay? Easy Eddie wasn't Al Capone's lawyer. He happened to be a lawyer that was a business associate of Al Capone, okay? If Al Capone got arrested for a DUI or whatever, it wasn't like he was calling up Easy Eddie to come represent him in court.
Yeah, I imagine that was the case because the way he was presented. I got the feeling it's like he wasn't like he was an acquaintance more than he was actually I wouldn't say mob member. I wouldn't know too much. I'm not too versed in the history, but like from what I was getting from him, it seems like it's more of a acquaintance more than it is, "Oh, hey, what's up, buddy? Don't worry, I got you."
That never happened. They then go on to explain that him and his son Butch have this amazing relationship, and Butch is the apple of his eye, and he uses the wealth that he's accrued from working with the mafia to give his son everything he could possibly want. And then one day he has a change of heart and realizes that he hasn't given his son a good role model in life to look up to. And at that moment he decided that he was going to help the IRS put Al Capone in prison, proving to his son how to be a good person, and then the mafia assassinates him for it. And then his son, having seen his father lay down his life to do the right thing, decides that he's going to go off and become a war hero in World War II. And it's this happy story about redemption and doing the right thing.
Like that's ever gonna happen.
It's also completely fucking made up and nonsensical. Okay, that story sounds great if Butch is like a 7-year-old little boy. He's not. He's 17 and he's been in military school since he was 13, and he's already about to go into the U.S. Naval Academy, okay? Do you know how fucking mad I would be if my dad that I had a great relationship with, like one of my best friends that I confided in at the age of 17, and he came to me and was like, "Son, I've done some pretty bad things in my life, and I've decided to prove to you how to be a good man. I'm going to go ahead and turn myself in and get myself assassinated by the mob just to show you how to do the right thing." You know what I mean? Like, hey, dad, counteroffer, hear me out. What if you just retired, you're already rich, and then you just stopped doing bad stuff? That would set a pretty good example. I'm also 17, so I don't need you to just like set the example. I'm old enough and mature enough to understand the concept of like, hey.
Yeah, that's the thing about like kids, including teenagers, like well, me at the time too. Technically this apply to every single person that was a teenager or indoor kid. Like we pick up on shit, right? So we know we like kids are bright. They'll pick up on things and they'll notice things, but most adults don't really like realize, but like we pick up on things that you don't really realize.
Hey, do as I say, not as I do, you know? Maybe don't go get yourself killed basically for no reason.
This city wept. We lost 2 heroes.
Wasn't even an awning in their direction.
No, I know.
Jumped 20 stories. Doesn't make sense, does it?
So again, that's complete nonsense fairy tale land. Not only is it not historically supported, it also doesn't even make sense if you understand people even a little bit. Okay, so here's what actually happened. In 1930, Easy Eddie does start working with the IRS because he's running all the dog tracks, he's helping Al Capone cook the books, and basically launder all the money, and he's going to be able to show the IRS how he's doing it, which is going to be able to allow them to put Al Capone in prison for tax evasion. Now,
the thing about it, kind of take back the story I was talking about with, well, I don't know how, again, I'm not too familiar with crime stories as much.
Here there's another myth that honestly I also don't buy, but basically they insinuate that Easy Eddie actually helped the feds put away Al Capone in exchange for guaranteeing that his son, Butch O'Hare, got into the US Naval Academy. Okay, and again, I don't know where this myth came from. I don't know why people believe this. There's almost no historical evidence that supports it, and if you think about it, it doesn't even make sense, okay? The US Naval Academy has like a 10 to 12% acceptance rate, and Butch O'Hare just spent the last 5 years in one of the most prestigious military academies in the United States, and he performed well there. He's pretty much guaranteed a slot at the US Naval Academy at this point. And we know how he performed once he got into the US Naval Academy, and there was nothing that even remotely suggested that he didn't belong there. So if he was going to get in anyways, why on earth would Easy Eddie go get Al Capone turned in and get himself killed for no reason?
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
So what do I think happened? I think that it was 1930 and Elliot Ness and his crew of uncorruptible cops known as the Untouchables were going around putting all the monsters in jail, and Al Capone was #1 on their list, and Easy Eddie, being the intelligent guy that he was, realized that if they got Al Capone and then
I was guessing that Untouchables was a real story in some way.
and they would just start working their way down the ladder, and they would eventually get to him too. So he figured, hey, maybe I should help them get Al Capone, and then I'll get my own freedom instead. Now, in addition to this, to be fair to the myth that I did just try to debunk, it would not surprise me if there was some portion of this conversation where Easy Eddie was like, hey, I'm willing to be your guys' informant. My son is applying for the US Naval Academy. If for some reason that it gets brought up that his dad is a famous mafia guy that works for Al Capone, and that is going to prevent him from getting in for that reason alone, I need you guys to tell them that I don't actually work for the mafia anymore and I'm working for you as an informant. That way my son gets what he deserves. Okay, that is a very, very big difference between he got his son in by turning in Al Capone and he got out of his son's way, while also saving his own skin, which was probably his primary goal to begin with. Regardless, Al Capone gets arrested and put in jail for tax evasion in 1931. Then in 1932, Butch sets off for the US Naval Academy. While attending the academy, Butch does a great job and goes back home every chance he gets to hang out with his mom, his dad, and his 2 sisters. Now, right around this time, Easy Eddie and Selma end up getting a divorce, and Easy Eddie actually moves to Chicago so he can be closer to the racetrack that he's running. Okay, fast forward 1937, Butch graduates from the Naval Academy and he decides that he wants to go off to become a pilot. Here's the problem: you can't just go off to become a pilot right after becoming a commissioned officer after graduating from the academy. You have to serve a minimum of 2 years in the Naval Surface Fleet, so he sets off to do that, serving his 2 years on the battleship, the USS New Mexico. So he does that for the next 2 years while dad is back home running the dog tracks in Chicago. Then 1939 rolls around. He's done his 2 years worth of time in the surface fleet. He applies to get into Naval Aviation School and he gets accepted. And right as he is about to ship off to go become a pilot, he receives word that his father has been murdered. On November 8th, 1939, Easy Eddie had just left his office at the dog track in Chicago and was driving home. And when he pulled up to a stoplight, 2 armed gunmen got out with 12-gauge shotguns and opened fire on him inside of his car. Eddie tried to escape, but he was shot multiple times and ended up veering off and crashing into a light pole, and he would pass away almost immediately from his wounds. Now, technically, we don't actually know who killed Eddie. This is considered a cold case. However, pretty much everybody agrees that it was a mafia because he was assassinated approximately 1 week before Al Capone was set to get out of prison from the tax evasion charges that Eddie helped with in the first place. So everybody just kind of assumed that this was Al Capone's gift for getting out of prison. Going back to my original anger with the oversimplified version of this story from blogs and newspapers and magazines and other YouTube videos, when they tell the story, it's like Easy Eddie helps turn in Al Capone and then he is assassinated for it. They fail to mention that he's assassinated like 9 years later, okay, which I feel is kind of an important detail. Okay, setting that aside, Butch takes emergency leave, he comes back home, he buries his father, and this is obviously extremely hard to do because that's his dad that died, but to make it even worse, the newspaper and the media is dragging his father, and by by extension his entire family, completely through the mud. You gotta remember, this is the 1930s, the anti-mafia sentiment is at an all-time high, and because of this, the newspapers and the law enforcement hype anything up they possibly can to make the American public feel safer. They want them to feel like the war against organized crime is being won, and in this case, they hyped up Eddie to be something a lot more than he was. This is where the myth that Easy Eddie was the mastermind, criminal, genius lawyer that kept the entire mafia out of prison came from. That's how the media portrayed him after his death. And did Easy Eddie do some bad stuff? Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, indubitably.
He enabled the mafia to make money from illegal gambling at dog racing tracks, and he made a bunch of money in the process as well. However, at no point was he the evil mastermind that was keeping Al Capone and all the money.
Yeah, I kind of figured that was the case. Like, he didn't seem like a criminal mastermind of that operation.
Mobsters out of jail. And having the newspapers vilify him to that degree was devastating to Butch and his family. I mean, yeah, he did some bad things, but he was a great dad to them, and from their perspective, he probably did those bad things to provide for his family. Whether that's right or wrong is a different conversation, but to them, he was still their hero. He was a great guy in their eyes. Not only did they have to deal with the emotional and mental stress of that, but they were also starting to get treated different by their community, because now the entire community...
Yeah, I imagine that would be the case. I imagine that would very much be the case. Just that getting out in itself, and it's like everybody else, the community looking at them and like scorning them to a degree. That's what I'm getting.
Down on them, because Easy Eddie was apparently this evil criminal mastermind, and all the money they have and all the fancy cars and the big house was clearly blood money, and now nobody liked the family either. At this point in time, it would appear that the last name O'Hare was forever going to be associated with the mafia and looked down upon forever. Now, I don't know this for sure because Butch never wrote about it, so I can't truly know his intentions. However, putting myself in his situation, I have to assume that he felt like his dad was in fact a good guy that was driven to do bad things for the right reason. Being in Butch's shoes, that's his dad, it was his best friend, it was his hero. Realizing that his dad had done horrible things to put Butch in the advantageous position that he was in now, having gone through military school, having graduated the U.S. Naval Academy, and now being headed off to flight school, Butch couldn't afford to waste the opportunity. His dad had become a villain so that Butch had the opportunity to become a hero.
Butch. Chapter 2.
So Butch does the only thing he can do. He goes back out to flight school. While there, he does okay in the classroom. He's not the best at taking written tests, but when it comes to actually getting Butch inside the planes, he is exceptional. He is one of the best pilots they've ever seen, and he's even better at...
Yeah, it's like quite the setup for that story. It's like family member in the group. Well, the biggest family member in the group does some heinous shit, and then one of the family members in the group has to... has to, like, show the world that it's like, okay, so if he's the villain, I'm the fucking hero. Something along those lines. Effectively, it's like, okay, yeah, so there's one bad apple, here's a good apple.
Gunnery. This guy can put rounds on target with his eyes closed. He graduates from flight school in May of 1940, then he gets stationed on the USS Saratoga, an aircraft carrier with VF-3. Okay, now at this point, we gotta remember it's early 1940, World War II has officially started, but America is not directly involved yet. That being said, pretty much everybody in the military is aware that America is going to be involved soon, and they are training extra hard to get ready for that, as well as training as many new recruits as possible. So all of America's best warfighters at this point in time are pretty much sent in to go train as many new guys as possible, and the man in charge of VF-3 to get all these new guys trained up and ready for war is a legendary pilot by the name of John Thatch. And this man is a complete badass. He is basically Maverick from Top Gun, except in the 1930s. And
that's fucking awesome.
40s. This guy was training all the new guys that came through VF-3, and it was his standard practice to take the best, cockiest new pilots they had, and he would take them up in the air in F-4F Wildcats and have a mock dogfight with them, and he would allow the cocky new guy to get the advantageous position on him just to shake them off, get behind them, and shoot them down first, just to show them how good they're not. Just the complete dad energy of, we're gonna set a tone right now out of the gate, you're not that good, you're gonna shut up, you're gonna listen to what I have to tell you, because it's the best chance you have at making fucking surviving that we have coming up. The dude is out there right now just breaking egos for a living, until one day there's a new pilot that shows up. He's not particularly cocky, but he's highly regarded as one of the best they have.
I'm built different.
And Thatch wants to take him up in the air just to see what he has, and he does what he always does. He lets them get the advantageous position, except this young pilot by the name of Butch O'Hare is so good that Thatch can't shake him. Now, Thatch is a better pilot overall, but O'Hare is so close in talent to Thatch that if Thatch does give up the tactical advantage, he's not able to recover. After seeing how incredibly talented Butch is, Thatch decides to take him under his wing and becomes his mentor. So they train a ton. It's that Yoda and Luke, the Mickey and Rocky type relationship. And one of the things that they start doing is they start trying to address the issues that they know they're going to run into once the war starts. And the big issue right off the bat is Japan's new fighter plane, the Mitsubishi Zero, that came out in 1940. It is faster and more maneuverable than the Grumman F4F Wildcats by a long shot. Okay, this means not only does the Zero have the edge in combat, it also means that the F4F Wildcats can't really run away because the Zeros will just chase them down and shoot them out of the sky. So Thatch, being the tactical genius that he is, realizes the only chance they're going to have is to fight. This situation is kind of like when he first met Butch and took him up into the sky. Thatch is a better pilot than Butch. However, if he was able to give up that small advantage, he wasn't able to recover. He needs to find whatever that small advantage is that the F4F Wildcat has over the Zero so that he can enable his men to win. And what he comes up with is a tactic that would later come to be known as the Thatch Weave. It's basically a counterpunch because he knows the Zeros are going to end up behind the Wildcats. They're faster, they're more maneuverable. Once a Wildcat has a Zero on its tail, another Wildcat's going to pull up next to it, and then they're going to cross paths, and then they're going to cross paths a second time, kind of like a zipper. And right as they're about to cross paths the second time, the wingman is directly lined up with the broadside of the enemy Zero, and he's going to be able to open fire without running the risk of shooting down his friend. Nice! So it looks good on paper, but obviously he's got to see if it works in real life. So he calls upon his protege, young Butch O'Hare, to go up with a bunch of other planes to be the bad guys and try to chase down him and his guys where he can test the tactic. And it works out great. Butch was not able to shoot down any of them. The Thatch Weave would then be proven combat effective at the Battle of Midway, and it is still considered a viable dogfighting tactic to this day. During all this training, Butch would actually get some time off. He goes out, meets a young woman by the name of Rita, and on their very first date, he asked her to marry him, and she says yes, because Butch O'Hare doesn't miss. Nice! They then go, they have a honeymoon in Hawaii, they come back, and they start living together in
nice little nod to Ching Lee Don't Miss.
California, while VF-3 is stationed at North Island Naval Center. And while he lived there, everything went great. He was training a ton, he was busy, but he did get to go home to his new wife every single night. And then one day, Thatch decided to make everybody in VF-3 come in for extra training on what appeared to be a random Sunday in December of 1941. And they did their training in the morning. Thatch cut everybody loose for lunch, and they were supposed to report back to finish training that night. And as Butch O'Hare was driving to his apartment to meet up with his wife for lunch, over the radio, he would find out that Pearl Harbor had been attacked. He gets home, he tells his wife, and I quote, "The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor. I'm to board the Saratoga as soon as possible. It's war. The very next day, the USS Saratoga and VF-3 set off from North Island to go participate in World War II. On their way there, the world would find out about Wake Island, where 450 Marines and 1,200 civilian construction workers fought off the Japanese on a small coral atoll that the Japanese wanted to use as a forward operational base. In the initial defense of Wake Island, the Marines and the construction workers were able to sink 2 enemy destroyers and a submarine, repelling their entire force. And this is looked at as America's first victory over Japan, and it was a silver lining that the entire country looked to in the days after Pearl Harbor. Because of this, America would immediately send ships to reinforce Wake Island. However, the ships that were leaving Pearl Harbor had a humongous...
By the way, that is such a good story. The Wake Island story, that is so good.
...head start. Amongst the American ships making their way there was Butch O'Hare and the USS Saratoga, as well as the rest of VF-3. Unfortunately, the American leadership would come to the realization that they were not going to be able to beat the Japanese there, and they didn't want to risk losing any more ships than they already had in Pearl Harbor, and they were ordered to back off and not try to save the Marines and the construction workers at Wake Island. After 2 weeks of fighting, the Marines and the construction workers were forced to surrender. Those that did not die in combat were either executed or held as POWs for the remainder of World War II. Because of how brutally the Japanese treated the civilian construction workers, the American government realized that they couldn't rely on civilian contractors to do all their construction on forward operational bases in the future. And this is where the Navy's construction battalion was originally founded, aka the Seabees. And those civilian construction workers that were at Wake Island are considered to be America's first honorary Seabees. During the same time, the USS Saratoga would be crippled by an enemy torpedo, and VF-3 would have to rotate and now be stationed on the USS Lexington. Once there, it is the Lexington's mission to penetrate deep into enemy territory so they can attack the port at Rabaul. They get like 450 miles away, and all of a sudden, a Japanese recon recon plane spots them, so they send some fighters up. Thatch himself shoots down this enemy recon plane. But he didn't get to him fast enough because they got that radio transmission out and the Japanese bombers are already on the way to hit the USS Lexington. They start getting fighters up in the air as fast as they can as 9 Japanese G4M Betty bombers show up, and some of the fighters are already starting to engage the bombers, shooting them down. And Butch O'Hare is the last man slotted to get up in the air. He's sitting there on the flight deck in his Wildcat, fully fueled up, as the bombers are coming in, getting attacked by the other Wildcats, and he's just waiting his turn to get up in the air, hoping that the bombers don't make it and bomb the USS Lexington with him right on top of it in a fully fueled up aircraft. By the time Butch gets up in the air, the combat's basically over. The bombers have been repelled, and most of the Wildcats are still chasing them down, and they end up shooting down all of them. And then a second wave of bombers gets detected on radar, and this is a humongous problem.
Holy fucking shit.
Oh.
You see, all the Wildcats are up in the air, and most of them have been in the air so long that they're out of ammo and fuel, and once those planes return from chasing down that first wave, they're going to have to land. They're not going to be able to fight. By the time that second wave gets close, the only planes available with fuel and ammunition able to fight are Butch O'Hare and the guy that went up right before him, Duff DeFillo. So what do? They do the only thing they can do. Butch and Duff get next to each other, and they are about to engage 9 Japanese bombers in a double V formation, and Butch fires his guns just to make sure they're all working, standard procedure. Duff goes to fire his. All of them are jammed. So Duff's out. It is now Butch O'Hare versus an entire formation of Japanese bombers all by himself.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
He's already running low on fuel.
Uh-oh. He's about to be... Please tell me this man's about to turn to a one-man army.
And he only has enough ammunition for 10 3-second bursts with his guns. He does not have enough ammunition to take down all of these planes, and even if he did, he doesn't have the time to do it all by himself. He needs to be as accurate as humanly possible, and that's exactly what he does. Using his expertise in gunnery, he is engaging engines and fuel tanks, and that is it. On his first pass, he manages to knock 2 bombers out of the formation. He then immediately goes into a second pass, engaging the first bomber he sees on the other side of the formation, critically damaging it as well, forcing it to drop its bombs early and peel away. He then engages the next bomber next to it, striking the fuel tank, causing it to blow up in midair. He immediately...
This man's became a one-man army. Let's go.
He goes into his third pass, shooting down another 2 bombers before making his fourth pass, engaging another one. And while this is happening, the crew of the USS Lexington is just watching in awe.
Yeah, dude, this is fucking awesome. That man is built legendary.
Have you not?
As it unfolds before them. The admiral on board said, and I quote, "All of us on the flight deck and the bridges became so intent watching the aerial battle that it was hard for us to concentrate on our duties. At the time, the entire ship's company burst into cheers as our fighter shot the bombers down into the sea. It was not as though they were in the midst of a life or death struggle, but at a baseball game." After his fourth pass...
this dude's built legendary. Let's go.
Butch was completely out of ammunition and almost out of fuel. The 4 remaining Japanese planes dropped their bombs, and all of them missed.
That is awesome.
All right! That wasn't so hard.
In the span of 4 minutes, Butch O'Hare had pulled off the impossible, going toe-to-toe with an entire Japanese bombing formation, and during that time, he was everywhere and nowhere all at the same time. The entire bombing formation, returning fire on Butch, managed to hit him with a total of 1 bullet. Butch was engaging the enemy so quickly.
This man is literally... No, this man is built ultimate. He is built ultimate.
From so many different angles.
Forget legendary. There's a new stage. He's built ultimate.
One of the surviving Japanese pilots said, and I quote, "Enemy planes swirled around us, zooming, banking, diving, attacking us from all directions, not realizing that it was one man."
Maybe
One man.
So the 4 remaining Japanese planes that dropped their bombs and missed, they peel off, they retreat. Butch goes to land, and as he goes to land, he drops his landing gear, and some new guy on the deck opens fire on him with a .50 caliber machine gun. Luckily, it was all misses. Butch gets out of his Wildcat, walks up to the guy that was just shooting at him. It's some new kid that is now just shitting his pants because he almost just killed the hero of the day. And Butch walks up completely cool, and he's like, "Son, I don't mind if you shoot at me. Just try not to do it with my landing gears down."
Yes, chef.
You're too dangerous to have on service.
Which is probably the politest way of calling this kid an idiot to his face imaginable, considering that he just shot at him with a 50
Yeah, you know, like, dude, the fuck.
caliber machine gun. Like, hey kid, if a plane has its landing gear down and you're on an aircraft carrier, it's probably trying to land on you, meaning it's not an enemy. Why would you shoot at me? Okay, now that the immediate threat is over, this has been like 30 minutes of straight chaos. We've got to figure out what all happened, where everybody's at, if they're okay. We have to get the planes ready in case there is another attack. There's a lot of stuff to do. So Butch, all the other pilots, and pretty much everybody else that would have seen anything goes in to get debriefed so the chain of command can try to figure out what all happened in this very busy couple of minutes. So Butch goes in and says, you know, I shot up 7 of those planes really good. I'm pretty sure I downed 6 of them. To which the captain of the USS Lexington is like, actually, I'm gonna go ahead and only credit you with 5 because after you pulled off after your last run, there was still 4 bombers in the air that dropped their bombs, and there was originally 9 to begin with. I do think that you shot down the other 5 though, because, well, pretty much everybody saw it happen. So now Butch has officially been credited with downing 5 enemy planes. This makes him an ace pilot. And
wait a minute, is that supposed to symbolize the amount of, is this supposed to symbolize him downing that many planes? That's freaking awesome.
The first naval aviator ace of World War II. And at first, Butch doesn't think anything of it. He doesn't regard himself as being special. He doesn't think what he did was incredible. He thought he did exactly what anyone else in Vietnam.
Dude, you did something that is incredible.
F3 would have done if they were in the exact same situation. As far as Butch O'Hare is concerned, the only thing about that day that was unique to him was that he happened to be in the right place at the right time. He wasn't necessarily the right guy. And then he came out of getting debriefed, and the crew of the USS Lexington had already went down to the machine shop and made him a trophy. He was everybody's best friend. He was the hero of the day that had saved the USS Lexington, and everybody was in love with Butch O'Hare. America's first ace. The crew of the USS Lexington and the rest of VF3 actually adopted a new drinking song that night as well. It goes something along the lines of, O'Hare, O'Hare, did the Japanese bombers go? O'Hare, O'Hare, could they be? Okay, now sidebar, in the spirit of full disclosure, retroactively after World War II, it has been decided that Butch O'Hare actually only shot down 3 enemy bombers on that day. Apparently this is because the Japanese documented that actually only 3 planes were shot down during that wave, 3 of them returned back severely shot up, and 1 of them apparently got lost in a storm.
Oh, fuck off, you big lamp.
You sure about that?
Okay, and this is where I get annoyed,
because
on one hand, like, yeah, okay, I understand wanting to figure out the truth and clarify things, but also I feel like Americans,
like that, I get,
typically tend to believe what the enemy says happened more than they believe.
Yeah, that's the odd thing, right?
The word of their own men. I mean, when the captain of the USS Lexington looks up in the sky and he's like, 1, 2, 3, there's 4 left, the rest were shot down. I don't know why we're not believing that guy. Why?
Yeah, I don't know either.
Why are we believing the Japanese documentation over that? And don't get me wrong, I understand that people make mistakes, and maybe the captain miscounted. Maybe the entire crew that was also watching had a bad account of what happened, you know? Because the enemy never ever makes mistakes, just like the enemy that was under the impression that he was getting attacked by multiple planes all at once and they were everywhere all over the place, when in reality it was just Butch up there by himself. Okay, and I know this is crazy and I'm definitely biased, but I'm always going to be more inclined to believe the guys on my team than the enemy.
What are you?
An idiot sandwich.
But hey, whatever. I'm not the expert. That's one thing. Whatever. Maybe everybody on the USS Lexington miscounted and the Japanese counted right. I guess that is possible. However, I will argue till I die that the Japanese pilot that got shot up by Butch O'Hare and then magically got lost in a storm that none of the other shot up planes managed to get lost in absolutely got shot down by Butch O'Hare. Okay, I don't care if the storm did.
Like the moment you told me that, I was like, yeah, I ain't believing that shit. No way.
The last 5% of the damage, Butch should get credit for that, okay? It's complete lunacy to say anything other than that. I mean, for real, apply this logic to any other situation. Imagine that you're at a party and there's an altercation that breaks out.
I was like, yeah, dude, I hate people that like do that shit, because like there was this video I've seen, it was one of the Up podcast videos, and he was talking about like the logic behind that's not real communism, and I was looking at the comments and I was like, oh my God, the absolute lunacy on display in that comment section of people like not like pseudo defending communism, right? And it's like, oh, that's not actually how you actually do communism, stuff like that. I'm like, dude, you clearly didn't see the video, because first off, It's not the fact that this is what communism is. It's the fact that the people that use it, like even to a degree, I'm like, dude, you cannot be this blind. You cannot. Surely. Why do you guys exist? Why are you defending something that does not work? And it's been shown in history that it doesn't work for a reason, but they still cope. I don't understand it.
Between Guy A and Guy B. And Guy A pulls out a gun, shoots Guy B in the chest 17 times, and then Guy B falls into the pool. Okay, are we gonna be like, oh, that guy drowned? No, Guy A killed Guy B.
Yeah.
Okay, that's obvious. I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted. I get super annoyed when there's some people that have nothing better to do with their lives and look back and retroactively nitpick and try to undermine the accomplishments of others. Honestly, Butch.
Yeah, I know. That's the thing. It's like, it's those type of people that's like, so I hate using this word, but it's like it's too appropriate for it. Insecure about other people's accomplishments. They'll try to undermine it in some way. Like those type of people I hate the most.
O'Hare probably wouldn't even care this much because all he cared about was saving his dudes. But also, he's a better man than I am. So, whatever. Moving on. Anyway, so over the...
Yeah, but like, yeah, he is. Even to me, he's better than me. He's a better guy than I am most of the time.
next couple of days, things kind of return to normal-ish. However, the USS Lexington is still on mission. They're still making their way to Rabaul so they can attack this port. And then once they get there, they start launching raids. Now, Butch is pumped. He wants to get back up in the air. He wants more combat. That's what he's here for, right? However, it gets decided by Thatch that Butch and Duff are to stay at the USS Lexington while everybody else goes out and conducts raids. And the theory behind that was, or at least the stated theory as to what Thatch told O'Hare was, hey, we're leaving you guys to defend it because we know if everything goes bad, you two by yourselves can defend the USS Lexington against anything.
Disappointed!
That's what Thatch told him. In reality, Thatch knew that Butch O'Hare was being put up for the Medal of Honor, and so did the rest of the chain of command, and they knew that they could not afford to let Butch get killed in combat. Okay, this is early 1942. This is 2 months after Pearl Harbor. The only silver lining, the only good news that America has gotten in the past 90 days was about the Marines and the construction workers making their last stand at Wake Island, and now they've all been captured, either killed or put in internment camps. Okay, America has not had any good news, except now they have the story of Butch O'Hare, the man that became an ace in 4 minutes. Shortly after this, Butch is informed that he's going to be receiving the Medal of Honor, to which he directly tells Thatch, I don't want it. He doesn't want it. He doesn't want to have to go back stateside. He wants to stay out there with his men. He still does not feel as though he did anything special. And the man that has been his father figure, his mentor for the past couple of years, basically pats Butch on the shoulder and informs him, too bad. Deal with it. You're a hero now. Now you got to go do that, because that's ultimately what's going to be the best for this war effort. And with that, Butch is sent back home stateside.
Wow, he even turned it down. That's fucking awesome, man. Respect.
Where there is both a literal parade for him when he arrives, and he is then metaphorically paraded around the country, conducting interviews, doing anything he can to boost the morale of the American people and the military in the wake of Pearl Harbor. During this metaphorical parade, he makes his way to the White House, where he is awarded the Medal of Honor by FDR, and his very own wife, Rita, is the one that gets to put it around his neck. And all of this is because he was just some fat kid from St. Louis that wanted some donuts, but also didn't want to walk very far to get them. And honestly, he's still that fat kid at heart. He's never been the star athlete. He's never had everybody looking at him. He's never stood in the spotlight for this long. And during this time, he is described as modest, humorous, inarticulate, very nice, and more than a little embarrassed by the entire affair. So he gets paraded around the country helping to sell war bonds until about June of 1942. Then VF-3 is actually set to come back to Hawaii for some R&R. And while there, VF-3's commander, John Thatch, is set to get a promotion and move on and advance his naval career. And he is going to be replaced by none other than his protege and war hero, Butch O'Hare. On June 19th, 1942, Butch O'Hare formally relieves John Thatch of command of VF-3 as he assumes command himself. John Thatch would then go on to say, and I quote, I know of no one I would rather see take my old command into new battles. Of course, referring to Butch O'Hare, and this meant more to Butch than winning the Medal of Honor.
O'Hara.
Unfortunately, this did not mean that Butch was going to get to go back into combat. VF3 had actually been taken, and they are now going to be training all of the new pilots to get ready for war, because America's practice at this point in time was to save all of our best pilots and make them teachers to train the next generation, as opposed to the Japanese who, well, they used up all their good pilots.
They all died.
So Butch and the remaining combat veterans of VF3 start training a bunch of new guys, and Butch officially becomes known as the King of Maui. Because, I mean, he's the war hero, everybody knows his name, he's training all the new guys, he's in charge. This guy is clearly the main character. And this is an important time because he's training the next generation of fighter pilots that he'll eventually take into combat, but he also gets to go home every night and spend time with his wife. And during this period, they end up having their daughter, Kathleen, that he gets to meet in March of 1943. With Butch leading all the training, VF3 became known as Butch's boys, and a lot of these pilots went on to become aces themselves, and they all had incredible things to say about Butch and the lessons that he was able to pass on to them. Then in August of 1943, VF3 was reinstated as VF6, and they were being stationed on the USS Independence, and they were being sent back into the Pacific Theater for combat. But unlike last time, Butch isn't going to have a plane that's outmatched by Japanese Zeros, because him and his men are not getting Wildcats, they're getting the new Grumman F6F Hellcat. And I cannot stress to you enough what a big difference this is. The Wildcat is outmatched by Japanese planes. The Hellcat, on the other hand, will go on throughout the rest of World War II to rack up a 19-to-1 kill ratio. Nice! And now Butch and his boys got the new Hellcats, and they proceed to go and fuck shit up. First thing they do is they go and they launch raids on Wake Island and Marcus Island. Butch lands a couple of more air-to-air kills, solidifying his status as an ace, even if people like to go back in time and try to discredit some of his kills. Then VF6, now VF3, gets restationed onto the USS Enterprise, and Butch, the war hero, gets put in charge of all 3 squadrons on the USS Enterprise. Damn. Here's the problem with that. Butch is now officially a bigwig. He's not supposed to be out there in a Hellcat mixing it up with the enemy anymore. He's supposed to be going up in like a Grumman Avenger, you know, a command plane, so he can see everything, see what's going on, be protected, be safe, be the smart guy up in the tower telling the troops on the ground what to do. Okay, but that's not how Butch gets down.
Yeah,
okay? He officially puts in a request that they repaint his Hellcat so
like, no, I'm going in.
that it can be his command and control vehicle.
I want to be with my boys.
And he's going to do everything from a Hellcat. And obviously, this is Butch O'Hare, the war hero and fighter ace. He's going to get what he wants, and he does just that. Now with Butch O'Hare in charge of over 100 pilots on the USS Enterprise, they go and provide air support to the Marine Corps as they make amphibious landings at Tarawa and Macon Island. And with the help of the new Hellcats, they absolutely crush the Japanese in daytime combat, so bad that the Japanese have to ditch the idea altogether. After the Japanese realize they can no longer go toe-to-toe with the American aviators during daylight, they resort to using night tactics. Basically, the Japanese resort to sending torpedo bombers out in the dark of night, launching torpedoes and hoping they hit American ships. Now, it's not super effective because the torpedo bombers can't really aim. However, it's also effective in that the Americans also can't really send planes up to stop them because night fighting at this point in time isn't really a thing.
Disappointed!
Okay, you gotta realize this is 1943. Radars are still fairly new technology, and they're mostly being used on ground arrays, and recently they're starting to be used on big naval vessels. They can't cram one of these things inside of a fighter plane yet. So at best, all the Americans can do is use the radar on the ship to see the enemies coming, and then essentially brace for impact. They are not gonna be able to scramble their own fighters to go up without a radar, because everything's relative up there, right? Even if the ship tried to tell the planes where the enemy was, like, is that my left or your left? Is that my guy or is that an enemy? They'd end up shooting.
Oh my god, the absolute confusion, man.
Shooting more of themselves down than they would the enemy. It'd be complete chaos. So that's really all the Americans can do is just hope they miss. That was until Butch came up with a plan. What if we took the Avenger, it's a big plane, we crammed a radar into that, and then sent the Avenger up with a bunch of Hellcats, and then as long as we could stay in formation, we would be able to tell in relation to ourselves where the enemy was.
That sounds like actually a good idea.
The Avenger could be like the enemies to the left, the enemies to the right, and everybody has the same left, the same right. The Avenger could guide everybody. Now, obviously, if the entire thing devolves into a giant dogfight, we're going to have a huge issue, but we should be able to ambush them under the cover of night and stay in formation and hopefully not lose it. And we don't need to go chasing kills. We just need to prevent them from launching torpedoes at the ship. We just need to either shoot them down while maintaining our formation, or we just need to scare them off. So Butch gets permission from the chain of command. They shove a radar inside of a Grumman Avenger, And now he starts developing night fighting tactics, and his crew becomes known as the Black Panthers. So in November 1943, they go up for their first night mission, attempting to intercept Japanese bombers. They were unable to find the Japanese bombers at night. However, they didn't get to shoot off their torpedoes, and they got all the planes back on the carrier under the cover of night. So it was deemed a pretty big success. Then November 27th, 1943, they go up for their second night mission. There's 2 Avengers and 4 Hellcats divided into 2 different groups, and they are going to go up there and stop the Japanese bombers. By the time all the American planes get up in the air, the Japanese bombers are so close that the Avengers are having trouble differentiating the radar signatures between the Japanese bombers and the American Hellcats. And before Butch and his wingman can actually find their Avenger and get into formation, Butch's Avenger actually runs into the Japanese bombers first and opens fire. Even though it's not a fighter, it does have some guns, but it's not a lot. Regardless, they're able to shoot down one of the Japanese bombers. And then Butch's Avenger again somehow runs into another Japanese bomber before finding Butch and the wingman, and it shoots that one down too. At this point, it's chaos. There's multiple planes in the air, American and Japanese, and they're in close proximity, and they don't know who is who. So Butch instructs his wingman and the Avenger to both turn on their cabin lights at the same time, so all 3 of them can see each other for a brief moment and be able to get into formation. So they turn the cab lights on for a brief second, they all see each other, then they turn them back off right away. At this point, the crew of the Avenger spots a Japanese bomber above Butch approaching him from the rear, most likely attempting to shoot him down. They radio to Butch that he has somebody on his tail, and they radio to the other Hellcat to send them forward to take out the bomber. Butch's wingman and the Hellcat speeds up, intercepts the bomber, opens fire, and the bomber opens fire on Butch. The bomber takes heavy damage and veers off into the darkness, at which point the crew and the Avenger radios, "Butch, we got him. Butch, we got him. Come in."
Oh,
over.
no.
And there's nothing.
No! It can't be! No!
Nobody knows exactly what happened, but it is believed that the bombing crew got a lucky shot off that pierced Butch's canopy, killing him directly without heavily damaging his plane. It is the only thing that would explain why he didn't radio that he had been hit. Despite extraordinary efforts, his remains were never recovered, and he was declared dead 1 year later. In addition to Butch O'Hare, 6 more American pilots would give their lives.
Man, press F to pay respects, man.
Conducting carrier-based night operations during World War II, utilizing the techniques that Butch O'Hare had helped develop. Those missions are credited with downing 103 Japanese planes that otherwise would have been able to attack defenseless American ships. Butch not only saved lives through his direct actions in combat, but through his expert training of the next generation of naval aviators in World War II, and his help developing groundbreaking techniques like the thatch weave and carrier-based night combat. In conclusion, this is why the airport in Chicago is known as O'Hare International Airport. It's named after a famous man named Edward O'Hare. And no, not the famous mafia lawyer that had ties to Al Capone and was famously assassinated, but rather his son, the man that overcame the sins of his father to become one of the greatest war heroes in American history. Thank you for watching. Best way to support the channel is go buy some merch over at thefatelectrician.com. Whack bang, out.
Man. What a fucking story, man.
Lieutenant O'Hara, tell us about what happened in the Pacific that February afternoon.
We were out there and we ran into a bunch of these Jap bombers. We think we did pretty good with them.
Are you thinking of yourself or hitting the other fellow?
Well, you don't have much time to think about yourself. The main thing you worry about is whether you can stop them before they get to your ship, because if you don't, why, you won't have any place to go when you do finish up.
Oh, wow. That ended sadly. That ended sadly. Anyways, that's going to be it for me today. Thank you guys for joining me today, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.